Hello, CanFiles viewers. Welcome to the next episode of the CanFiles Speaker Series. This is Aidan Jonah, Editor-in-Chief of the CanFiles, back in here one time in relief of Camila Escalante. So today we are speaking with the Ambassador of the Russian Federation to Canada, Mr. Oleg Stepanov. Mr. Stepanov was appointed to his current role in March of 2021. Mr. Stepanov, thanks for speaking with the CanFiles.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, so you are 2 years into your assignment, which may not be that long in diplomatic years, but the world has changed so significantly since 2021, and 2.5 years is reasonable time for some takeaways. But to start, what were your initial feelings when you learned that you would be Russia's ambassador to Canada beginning in March 2021?
Well, I was very excited because Canada is a major neighbor of our country, and such an appointment is an honor for the Russian diplomat, especially taking into the account the history of my predecessors, who were deputy foreign ministers, who were deputy ambassadors to United Nations, directors of the North American department in the Russian Foreign Ministry. And for me, as a former policy planner, it was a very exciting perspective.
All right, so what did you know, about Canada and Canadians before you started, and what have you learned ever since?
Well, as you probably know, I was posted for almost 14 years in different positions in the United States, and actually had a chance to visit Canada as a tourist many times. So I love the country, but of course, being a tourist doesn't give you an opportunity to have an in-depth glimpse of the life here. So, there is a maybe stereotype in Russia that Canada is more like the United States, but immediately when I came here already on my permanent assignment, I understand that it's two different countries, two different cultures, and different psychology, different attitude to life, and each of the countries are unique, and for me it was a very enriching experience.
Thank you for that. So, how are you hoping that Russia-Canada relations could evolve at the time of your appointment, and have those expectations really managed to correspond with reality?
Well, my idea and my government idea is that, first of all, we are neighbors. Secondly, we are two largest countries in the world, territorially speaking, right? We have practically the same amount of territory lying behind the polar circle. We have indigenous communities. We have very similar balances in economy regarding extracting natural resources, technological advances, and everything. And being countries of the North and being northern neighbors, being the members of the Arctic Council, it seemed for me it's natural that we have to strive to look forward to the productive, good neighborly relations between our countries, because we can complement each other. Also technologically, not only in the high north, but technologically in a broader sense, because Russia is a major space nation. Canada's input into space cooperation is also tremendous, and we can benefit from each other's cooperation. That is my natural feeling.
Thank you, Ambassador. So before we move on to other topics, I want to get your thoughts about something that put Canada in the spotlight on the global stage for all the wrong reasons. With the situation in Palestine, Canada's state salute for a Nazi veteran has been largely forgotten, unfortunately. I'd want to know, what was the reaction within the Russian embassy and your personal reaction once you came to realize Canada's parliament had honored a Ukrainian Nazi, Yaroslav Hunka, who fought in the Waffen SS 14th Division?
Well, you can guess our reaction, of course, because my country lost 27 million people during Second World War, around 11 million soldiers, and the rest 16 million were just massacred in genocide by the Nazis. And of course, it was outrageous. I was very, very surprised that Honorable Anthony Roth was reading that greeting. My impression was that he started to understand when he was reading that something wrong is going to happen. I don't know whether he studied the topic beforehand, or he was just giving talking points by his assistants. I noticed a small pause when he was saying that the guy was fighting against Russians, and then probably he understood that something is wrong, is going to happen. And but speaking bluntly, it's an insult to the memory of the Canadian veterans, Canadian sons and daughters who fought against Nazis alongside, hand to hand, with the Russians, with the Soviet Union, with the Brits, with the Americans, with the French, because we fought against Nazis to liberate Europe. And those guys, like Hunka, they were fighting alongside the Nazis and committing terrible crimes in Poland, in Ukraine, in Belarus, in the Russia proper territory. So that ignorance regarding history, well, it's very sad. But I mean, people who organized this event, who invited him, they absolutely knew on which side he was fighting. But I don't know what was the logic of such a commemoration. But it harmed, obviously, the reputation, not of Canada, but at least of the establishment in the Ottawa bubble.
Certainly, it's a disgrace. So there's two important Canadian individuals, Liberal MP Yvonne Baker and Canada's Chief of the Defence Staff, General Wayne Eyre. They've actually refused to condemn Parliament's honoring of Hunka, and they've refused to apologize for their individual honorings of him in Parliament. You know, what do you think it says about, let's say, more than anything, the Canadian political elite, that these individuals haven't faced scrutiny from the government in Baker and Eyre's case, and the military, you know, for Eyre's case? What do you think about that?
Well, I'm very saddened and very surprised, because in a country, in a nation of liberal democracy like Canada, such outrageous behavior would, in other cases, bring just an early retirement, probably, for a politician or for such a high military commander. Yes, they were applauding him, clapping him. It's all in the videos. It's everything is on YouTube. But one of the topical moments, probably with this situation, that obviously Yaroslav Hunka was invited by the Canadian-Ukrainian Congress. They keep silent about that. Mr. Baker, as an active member of the Congress, keeps silent about that. And probably there is an intention that just everybody forgets about that, and they that practice of impunity regarding glorification of Nazism by certain politicians will kind of be forgotten or unnoticed. I also want to mention that General Ayer was making quite a controversial remarks recently. As it was reported by Canadian media, he said that Canada in a state of war with Russia and China. And for the top military commander of one of the major NATO countries, G7 countries, such a statement is, to say at least, very irresponsible, especially when you are talking about relations with your neighbor and with the member of the P5 nation and the major nuclear nation.
Oh, it's certainly terribly, terribly irresponsible, and it's totally detached from reality in the first place. On the front of the apologia for Nazism in Canada, it's a major problem, and I remember reading through when I was doing some research for previous articles that there was a push by the Ukrainian banderites in Canada for a commission about Soviet war criminals, Canada's ally that fought against the Nazis. They do this stuff in the background, and then when they get the chance, they're honoring the Waffen-SS division. That is the unfortunate nature of things. But regarding Hunka himself, Russia, of course, is seeking his extradition to face the Russian justice system. Can you explain to Canadians why your country seeks his extradition and the concrete steps Moscow is taking to ensure that justice is served?
First of all, when that situation unfolded, I wrote my personal letters to the Prime Minister and to Minister Joly, expressing our position and underlying that it's unacceptable when those who fought in SS congratulated in Canada, and that there are several memorials built on Canadian soil commemorating those who were known participants of atrocities against population of the Eastern Europe and Soviet Union, including participation in Holocaust. So my government studied the archives, and we know for sure it just one episode. The work is still going on. That the division where Yaroslav Hunka served is responsible for killing at least 500 people in the territory of the former Soviet Union. I know also that the ambassador of Poland made a statement that they have also certain information about participating of that Galicia division in genocide against Poles and Jews in the Polish territory. So we have an agreement, a treaty with Canada on mutual legal assistance. So now the investigative committee of Russia and our general prosecutor's office are assembling the dossier to formally address the government of Canada in order to extradite and prosecute Yaroslav Hunka. But there is a separate issue in this regard. When I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister and to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, one of the questions that I put in front of them, what Canada is going to do in its national capacity regarding Mr. Hunka, because it is now known that he participated in genocidal crimes, and what the law enforcement agencies of Canada are going to do about that. That's also a very important question.
Certainly. And speaking of Nazism, Canada's UN votes around the glorification of Nazism. We've seen Canada repeatedly vote against resolutions on that front. You know, seeing that happen again and again, what's the feeling within the embassy?
Well, of course, we are very disappointed. Canada used to abstain in several cases regarding that resolution. And we actually were communicating with Global Affairs Canada that the next step would be to vote for that, because we are all the countries of anti-Hitler coalition who fought together. So it's natural that remembering the deeds of our grandfathers and fathers, we have to continue in the spirit of the UN Charter that condemned the Nazi axis and stated that no other global war ever have to be fought. And also acting in the spirit of Nuremberg Tribunal, which condemned Nazism and condemned the leading figures of Nazi Germany, and also condemned the SS and Waffen-SS as criminal organizations. So in a complex, these have to bring all the countries who either suffered from Nazism or fought against Nazism to vote for that resolution. But unfortunately, Canada in this case follows the lead of your southern neighbor of the United States. I worked for 14 years in the United States, for almost 9 years in Washington, D.C., and they was every year having communications with the State Department, and they were kind of defending their position when they vote against it or when they abstain, that our resolution may infringe on the freedom of expression in the United States. You know that in the United States, in every bookstore, major bookstore, you can buy Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. And it is considered to be a part of kind of freedom of speech enshrined in the US Constitution. But for me, such an explanation doesn't hold any value, because in many countries, NATO allies of the United States and Canada, it's prohibited to express any neo-Nazi or Nazi sympathies. Take Germany, for example. It's criminalized and in many countries of Europe. So why it is allowed here or in the United States, for me, it's a riddle.
All right, so we're going to shift fronts now to the NATO proxy war on Russia. So in the months leading up to Russia beginning its special military operation, you had Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly dismissing the possibility of diplomacy with Russia to address its concerns. Yet I've seen many a person claim that Russia could have taken so many different further steps to avoid this SMO. Can you speak to Russia's diplomatic efforts in the few years before 2022, to address its security concerns?
Yes, well, the diplomacy have been going for many years, even before the 2014 coup d'etat in Kiev. But when the overthrow of the government of President Yanukovych happened, we have to remember the consequences of events. The first draft law that was proposed by a new parliament of Ukraine was forbidding Russian language in Ukraine. And even then, I was asking my Canadian counterparts in Global Affairs Canada, why do you think that it's good for Canada to be a multicultural society, bilingual, English and French, and that every person here, whatever major language he wields, is entitled to get any services wherever he is. For example, a citizen of Quebec coming to Vancouver, speaking French, and he's entitled to have services in French. The same goes with an English-speaking citizen of Canada when he goes to Quebec. And so why do you refuse Ukraine the right to be the same bilingual country and democratically give a right to people, because at least 40% of the population of Ukraine are ethnic Russians and Russian speakers maybe even more, to let them exercise cultural and ethnic rights. And I never received an answer to that question, unfortunately. So in my view, I believe that a practice by the consecutive governments of Ukraine to forcefully Ukrainize the population, to deprive them of their language, family, ethnic rights, ethnicity, history, is one of the major root of the current conflict. Then, okay, in 2014, when there was kind of a unconstitutional coup, and obviously those regions in the east of Ukraine hearing that the first draft law was to forbid Russian language, they said, wait a second, we never recognized the legality of that Maidan revolution, and we want to keep our way of life. So let us consider what current situation can, how it can be handled. But they were never given an opportunity to express their opinion democratically, and the new government in Kiev, led by President Poroshenko, they declared so-called anti-terrorist operation in the east of Ukraine and against Crimea. But what does it mean, anti-terrorist operation? Those people never attacked Kiev. Those people sat in their homes. They just said, well, we need time to consider the situation. But they were immediately, because they are ethnic Russians, they were immediately called terrorists. And I was explaining to my Western counterparts many times that for Russia, this is a existential matter. We cannot allow our compatriots, our brothers, to be deprived of their basic rights. So you are pushing us to interfere. So that was the root of the problem. Then you remember the story when Ukrainian forces tried to attack Donbass, they were repelled, they countered massive losses. President Putin proposed, together with our French and German counterparts, and proposed to President Poroshenko, let's sit and negotiate the future of those regions within Ukraine. And so the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements were elaborated. And those agreements were very simple. They were giving rights for those regions to elect their local governments, to be policed by their local law enforcement, to elect their judges, and to educate their children in a language they want, be it Ukrainian or be it Russian. So it was very, very mild, very kind of very favorable for Ukraine agreement, because if that agreement was honestly implemented by the Ukrainian side, it would keep both Crimea and those regions of Donbass as a part of Ukraine. But what President Poroshenko did when he returned from the Minsk negotiations, instead of coming to the parliament, to Rada, and saying that I bring you victory, he said, well, I signed some papers, but we don't have to implement them at all. And since that time, there was a very kind of hostile status quo on the ground, because the regions were not sure of the Ukrainian intentions, and Ukraine was intending to continue with that forceful policy. Regarding Crimea, your readers and listeners also must know that Ukraine cut the main water channel. The water goes from the Ukrainian proper to Crimea by a special channel, because Crimea is a kind of a desert island. And they just cut the water. So for several years, they were trying to suffocate the citizens of Crimea. And those citizens they considered to be the Ukrainian citizens, right? But they were trying to deprive them of water, and it's a major military crime. And despite Russia putting that issue on every international multilateral forum, our Western counterparts ignored that problem completely. So it was like a building critical mass that brought everything that is happening now. And again, I would like to also note that prior to the special military operation, none of the major capitals of NATO countries expressed the concern of concentrating of several 100,000 of Ukrainian troops on the borders of Donbass. They were blaming Russia for concentrating our troops on the border with Ukraine, but it was done only in response in our concern that Ukraine might be trying to exercise a blitzkrieg operation against its eastern territories. So this situation is much more complicated that it's presented in the mainstream media of the West.
Thanks for that in-depth answer. So let's Canada and Russia relations. They've been impacted by Canada's vocal support of Ukraine, both in rhetoric and actual support provided. What do you think has been the extent of that impact?
Well, we believe Canada is our neighbor. Russia never considered Canada as a threat or adversary or enemy. We obviously understand that Canada is a member of NATO alliance. It has strong connections with the United States, both economically and politically, but it doesn't preclude us from having a good neighborly relations. I remember the father of the current Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who, being a head of the NATO nation at the same time, tried to exercise independent foreign policy regarding then Soviet Union. And he invented the so-called hockey diplomacy. We remember the 1972 famous series and everything. So he was proponent of people-to-people contacts and the understanding through sports. And what I believe my capital, my nation, my government would welcome if the current of following Canadian cabinet tries to pursue the same independent policy, both globally and towards Russia. Because, we are neighbors. We are not going anywhere. Russia doesn't go anywhere. Canada doesn't go anywhere. And as I said, we have so many similarities, so many common issues and common goals that we just benefit of better understanding towards each other. And in this regard, I believe in people diplomacy as well, because I have many friends here in Canada now, and sometimes I tell them stories about life in Russia, and some of them don't believe. But some of them go to Russia, and then they understand that it's completely different from from how Russia is portrayed in the mainstream media in the West. So I believe that if you want to see it, you see it with your own eyes, and you go there and you just talk to people. You live there for a week or two. You see Moscow, maybe St. Petersburg. You just see it by yourself, and then make your own conclusion. I'm not trying to push a kind of a Porsche image of Russia, but I believe that the image should be objective, and for that, a person just need to go there.
What I want to get onto is the Canadian sanctions. What is the extent of the impact of those sanctions since the SMO began been on Russia?
Well, sanctions never work as they are intended by those who implement them. On one hand, on the other hand, unilateral sanctions are illegal from the point of view of international law. And thirdly, it just tremendously hurt the interest of Canadian businesses. We never had a huge bilateral trade over, but when I came here, it was decent 2.5 billion US dollars. And nowadays I see it shrank to probably $70 million. So you see the difference. And I know there is a part of the business community in Canada, and of course businesses in Russia who were interested in mutually beneficial relations. Now some Canadian exporters are deprived of that opportunity because the government of Canada forbid them to do so. Some Canadian businesses, for example, one of the major global players like Kinross Gold were forced by the government of Canada to leave very profitable Russian business, and now they lost their global standing, and I heard they probably now being in the process of acquisition, but by another international mining company. So this just examples. Polar aviation, we had good projects. We had good projects with Bombardier, both in aviation and in railroad business, etc., etc. So that type of sanction policy, it mostly hurts Canadian businesses, and Canadian farmers as well, because the Trudeau cabinet forbids any maritime connections between our countries, and air connections as well. So, and we were supplying a lot of fertilizers to Canadian farmers. Now they are looking for other markets, but at the same time, markets, because of the sanctions, are shrinking, and Russia was a major supplier of the fertilizer. So the price of the food goes up, not only in Canada but globally. Deputy Prime Minister Freeland and other members of the cabinet, they're trying to blame Russia for that, but actually it's just the result of the sanctions imposed against Russia, because we just cannot export our products to your market.
All right, so let's shift to the situation for Russian Canadians in Canada. So how are Russian Canadians in Canada dealing with the aftermath of the SMO and just the situation in Canada since? And were the embassy, has there been initiatives, any efforts to help the community through a rather difficult time?
Well, we received signals of discrimination, hate expression, hate crimes against the Russian community. Community is obviously under pressure, and I just returned to my previous remarks about the aftermath of Hunka case, when the representatives of Canadian Parliament and government expressed their apologies to practically every community that was hurt by that case, but there are no apology to the Russian community. So it gives us the impression that we are under silent discrimination and cancel culture. I wrote a comment several weeks ago saying that Russian community in Canada, they're voters, they're legal residents, they're taxpayers, and they deserve much better attitude from the government, because it seems that if you're Russian, and the only Russian community can be kind of put under such pressure here. We had cases when kids were bullied in schools, but those were more or less solved. But we had cases when people were actually fired from their jobs for being Russian or participating in the Russian community activities. So, but as an embassy, We, of course, cooperate with our community, and I advise them, I actually urge them to use all legal instruments here in the Canadian society to protect their rights, because every living being and any citizen here in Canada has to be protected equally with regard to their rights.
Absolutely. Have you been able to have any conversations with the Canadian government or, say, even provincial government officials about protecting the rights of Russian Canadians?
Yeah, absolutely. We are in constant communication with the Global Affairs Canada. Unfortunately, our communication with the provincial authorities bit deteriorated since the beginning of the special military operation. I understand that philosophically, that probably it's toxic for them to speak with the with the Russian ambassador. But Global Affairs Canada continues to hold the professional channel communications with us, but we are interested to see more results in reaction to the concerns of the Russian communities than we experience now.
Thank you for that. So, with respect to, of course, your rather busy schedule, we'll head towards the end now, looking towards the potential of the future. So, looking ahead, what are prerequisites for fruitful Canada and Russia relations?
Well, it's kind of a simple formula because we have to be guided by the United Nations Charter. So Russia recognizes legal interests of Canada, be it globally or locally. We recognize Canada's sovereignty. Russia never interfered. I would like to underline that Russia never interfered in internal processes in Canada, despite whatever is said by certain individuals. And we just expect the reciprocal approach on behalf of the future Canadian governments, that we both recognize each other with our sovereignty, with our peculiarities, with our cultural similarities or cultural differences, and we just, how it is said, live and let live, right?
It's fair to say that if the Canadian government, took a couple big steps back, that Russia would be very happy to have friendly engagements with Canada.
Well, we are where we are, but we are diplomats. We are being paid to improve relations, and I always advocated for avoiding public arguments through the Twitter or mass media, and when we have legitimate concerns, that's where we diplomats for. We can discuss anything, any difficult topic behind closed doors, and find the balances of interest, find mutual solutions. And I'm very much in hope that future generation of Canadian politicians will take on board that type of approach.
Certainly, I mean that's what diplomacy is all about. Unfortunately, from the West, seeing the Western diplomacy has been rather disturbing. Half the times it feels like diplomacy is going on by Twitter. You have the Ukrainian government accounts acting like social media influencers. Global Affairs Canada constantly insulting Russia or China. It feels like almost immature diplomacy. And obviously, I know you can't really comment on that, but it's crazy for me to watch as a citizen of Canada. But anyways, let's end this off. So let's assume these Cold War attitudes that are being held in Canada, they're quelled. What are you talked about it earlier, but let's get to it again. What are the potential areas of cooperation between Russia and Canada? How can Canadians benefit from that?
Well, I believe that, for example, with the climate change, we can cooperate on many green technologies. Russia has a lot of expertise in atomic energy, for example, that is very clean in the small modular reactors. I know that there is an interest here in Canada in also developing that technology and other green technological cooperation. We are also interested in sustainability of our northern communities, including indigenous communities. Also, Canada and Russia can share their mutual expertise on that and even build bilateral mechanisms of cooperation. Human-to-human contacts, humanitarian cooperation, of course. I'm very upset, really, that because of the current political tensions, we practically lost the academic exchanges and exchanges between our students and between our academicians, between our wise men, which is, I believe, always beneficial as a second, third track of bilateral relations. Then we will need to explore how to restore the inter-parliamentary contacts, because relations and contacts between parliaments are very important when even when the relations between the executive branches of the government are sour. But in the current situation, Canada put every Russian parliamentarian and senator under sanctions. We had to reciprocate, so we need to think about how to restore that channel of communications in the future. And again, aviation, space, peaceful cooperation in space still goes on, thankfully, and we'll need to be considering the future of the International Space Station. And with the Canada expertise, I know you supplied Canadarm, that manipulator, very, very exquisite piece of technology, and Russia also major space nation. We obviously would benefit from peaceful cooperation in space. So in reality, we have absolutely unexplored field of mutually beneficial interactions. We just need to kind of find wisdom and serenity to and honestly move forward with regard to all those issues. And yes, as you said, avoiding Twitter diplomacy and returning to the realistic classical diplomacy as well.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with CanFellows for our speaker series. CanFellows viewers, that was the latest episode of the CanFellows Speaker Series with Mr. Oleg Stepanov. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you.